Hi, and welcome back to the workshop. Well, I suppose not really workshop, but the garden. And today I'm going to talk about modelling trees. Perhaps not the usual sort of how-to video. A blend between craft and headspace, mindfulness. We're outside, can hear the sheep, can hear the birds. Take it all in, and whilst doing that, I've got some reference material, Gordon Growitt's great book. If you haven't got this, it's a really good place to start. And I've got the materials I'm going to use as well. A pair of wire snips and some, I think this is actually cable that you use for sort of van conversions when you're doing battery wiring and things for leisure batteries and stuff. We strip the insulation off and the copper wire inside, we use that. So come and join me and let's twist some wire together to see where the conversation takes us. So it's been a bit damp overnight, still a bit of water around, and the road's wet. The A5 across the valley, you can hear that a little bit over the sound of those birds this morning. So the first job is I cut this cable to length into short lengths, and then run a knife blade down the insulation, peel that off. What you've got inside then is a series of sort of grouped strands, which can be useful. So I'm just going to put them to one side. If you're doing a smaller tree, then you perhaps start from individual strands, but what I'm going to be working on first is I'm building a model railway for a customer at the moment, and I want to do a custom tree for that. I'm going to base it on an elm, the shape at least of an elm, or at least try and sort of channel an elm. Knowing me, it'll end up a little bit more like an oak, as these things tend to. So it's all about just twisting pairs usually, but I'm going to just twist these up a bit and start from there. So that's 2 pairs done together, and I'm going to do the same again with another 2. Okay. It's lovely to hear those birds. There's no rocket science to this, it's just more about feel, and the more you do, the better you get. It's about looking at the real trees surrounding us, but also those in photos. I quite often wander around during the winter and take photos of leafless trees for this purpose, you know, reference material if you like. Okay, this is probably going to end up being more like an N scale tree, because of the length of pieces here, but that's okay. You know, I'm modelling Engage as well, so maybe this example will end up like that. Okay, so normally, I'll show you actually, I'll put this one down for a second. Normally I'd be starting, I'd separate all these out into individual strands, take 2, cross them over, just start twisting them. Twisting them into pairs. So probably it's going to be that way. So probably like an inch of free at the top and then twist up an inch. That's not my cat, that's someone else's cat. I don't have cats. I've got obviously Bronwyn the dog. She's inside at the moment. Oh, I must have stabbed myself with the with one of the pieces of copper. Even though this is only copper wire, it's obviously still sharp enough to sort of pierce your skin. So you know, you're mixing. Hello, Mr. Blackbird. We've got a bunny actually as well, a little baby bunny knocking around somewhere at the moment in the garden, a wild one. We tend to find him at in the evenings. So I've twisted 3 on this one, so it's a bit of variety. I've got a branch off the side, and there's 3 left from that bunch, so I'm going to do the same again, I think. Right, so now I've got pairs here. We can put them together. So, you know, take them, cross them, so you've got your loose ends here. Sort of intertwine them a little bit. I have to be particularly organised, but just pinch them with one set of fingers and then twist them quite tightly with the others. The tighter you twist it, the easier it is later. I've got a pair there. Do another pair. I'm kind of doing this from sort of memory, sort of pictures in my mind, and the act of twisting these together is something I've done for so long now. I don't tend to even think about it, but obviously the first time you do it, you're thinking, oh my god, how do I make this into a tree? If you start with the twigs, you know, the twig, you twist them into thin branches, combine pairs of branches to make thicker branches, you know, and you eventually end up with your trunk, don't you? So it's small steps. I actually find myself breathing into this. You're not getting a lot of instruction here, are you? But I'm breathing into this. I'm feeling myself becoming more relaxed as I sat doing this. You know, I was listening to the news this morning and it just ends up end up getting aggravated and stressed and shouting at the radio about, you know, the state of the world. Out here, in nature, modelling nature, kind of, I don't know, does certainly help me anyway. You can see I'm starting to get more structure, more something that looks a bit more like, at the minute, a tree, just from combining these pairs. It started with those twigs, didn't it? And we're already up to quite a thick branch. And as the branch gets thicker, it's important to get the elements sort of more tightly incorporated, because this copper armature that I'm creating here will need coating. You know, Gordon's got his own methods here, but I've got a bit of a cheating method. I basically use, to start with, painting the whole tree with PVA. So once I've got my basic tree done, which we're quite a long way from at the minute, but once that's done, coat the whole thing with PVA, which is obviously flexible, but stops the thing untwisting. And then you can build it from there. So actually, you know, like, this isn't a beech I'm building here. This is typically, of me, is going to end up being an oak. I just know it. I just absolutely love oak trees. I end up twisting them up all day long, really. So I'll tell you what, we'll pause that one for a minute and we'll come back to this process. So whilst this tree has been formed from the twigs up, this is a shortcut, which I don't know if I have a preference really. I think I like building them up from the basics, but if you work on this premise, then what you're doing here is you're just splitting. So you're starting from a trunk, or a branch I suppose, and breaking it down into smaller branches and twigs. It's just a case of pairing off and twisting down and forming it in reverse. I find it easier to, I find it easier to build up a believable tree from the other way. But this is, if you're up against time, or if you're building trees that perhaps go towards the back of the layout, this is no less enjoyable, but it definitely produces more of a less detailed, less realistic, you know, you're just working with, it almost looks slightly manufactured because of the way the branches are more equal to start with. You know, there's less variation because you've not built it up sort of artistically from scratch. You've started and you've divided, and just by nature you're dividing sort of mathematically rather than artistically, if that makes sense. Does my waffling ever make sense? Okay, so you know, you can also, the other thing with this process actually as well is that if you want to have long twigs, you know, this is the way to do it, because you're sort of pairing up and going this way rather than starting here and going down. And when I start here, go down, I tend to make the twigs about, as I say, about an inch. And what as I grow this tree, these all get twisted and gnarled up, and then I'll chop them all down as well, because I quite like them being a bit shorter. In this process we end up with quite long ones, which if you're going to add a load of foliage, you know, from sort of like a foliage product, I tend to use, there's a Woodland Scenics, I can't remember what it's called now off the top of my head. It's like a matrix of foam that you can tease out. They do it obviously with the foliage ground foam in, but they also do it as a but polyfibre, that's what it's called. They also do polyfibre on its own, and you can just tease it out. That's great for this. So, you know, long twigs, polyfibre, twigs give you the shape, the polyfibre gives you the structure, and then obviously you just use scatters on top to give you your leaf appearance. And then what tends to happen is that process then needs the tree to be painted with an airbrush, you might experience, but it's all calm, isn't it? Ah, the sun's come out. That's lovely. And I know you can't see it, although you might have done in the intro. There's 2 apple trees down in the bottom corner of our small garden are in blossom. She's really, really pretty. Obviously, not for much longer, I suspect. I've got my back to the garden, actually, really, or looking at our greenhouse, which, as I twist these up, I'm looking at a healthy looking crop of cucumber plants that my partner Janie's growing from seed, and we're also trying some peppers this year. We always do really well here with the cucumbers, but tomatoes can be a bit hit or miss. You know, we're growing them in the greenhouse. More of a southern aspect here at the end of the house, and it just becomes like an oven in the summer. So I think that's probably what does them in, but also means the cucumbers are amazing. So, you know, I'm hoping the peppers like that, but it's experiment, we'll see what happens, doesn't matter. Just the other side of our hedge is the small country lane. Whether this is the post, I don't know. Could just be a delivery. Really just locals and farmers. I think it's someone looking for something, but he's not found it, and he's not for us. I am expecting some parcels today, so you never know, it could be. Sorry. Oh, there he goes, disturbing the peace. Well done, Anne. Oh, it's an enterprise van, but I don't know what's in it. It's funny, you can almost see that stress, that anxiety, well, not anxiety, but that energy, nervous energy has created a slightly, a different, as I've got lost in that, it's created a different branch structure there. Very funny, the way our brains work. That's just for the neighbour. I hope you're enjoying this. Perhaps I'm just on in the background. You know, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I mean, I sometimes do it. I've put something on in the background and just get on and lose myself in what I'm doing, listening to something, or sometimes music, but sometimes a story or a play. And keeping our hands busy helps. Does it help? It certainly seems to help me. The subconscious helps us sort of process the things that perhaps are bothering us. So it's not shaped like a tree yet, but it's starting to be branches, twigs, you know, so there's a difference here, isn't there? You know, in the same sort of time I've created something nearly double the physical volume, but perhaps, as I say, less heart in this one. So carry on. Going to create a few more branches for this process. So again, just taking a pair of strands and joining them. With that, I'm going to add a third on its own to that one. Twisting them tightly together. during the winter I love doing this in front of the fire when I'm in the mood, sitting down and just cracking on. You know, actually at the moment having the snooker on would be this should be great with the snooker. Really enjoy how sort of calm and measured watching that can make me feel as well. And the difference is that when I sat down, my breathing was quite fast. You know, I've been dashing around, I've been airbrushing something, and I've been thinking about something else and ordering some parts for another commission. And now, because that courier delivery is kind of just almost highlighted it even more, you know, that made my heart race again. And now I feel calm again. Not calm, I don't feel calm. Just take those deep breaths and oh, that sun is lovely, absolutely gorgeous on my back. So I wonder if this is something you actually do already. You know, how do you feel about making trees? What does it do for you? Is it something you look forward to? You know, the creative process of it, or you know, do you enjoy just the craft of making them and the way that makes you feel? You know, what are you channeling? I think something I said in my book was about, you know, that old oak was every tree I'd ever sat beneath as a child, you know. And that feeling of being connected to nature was really powerful for me. It tells stories, you know, and a lot of my work is about sort of storytelling, whether that's my own story, exploring myself through story, or helping to tell someone else's story for them, you know, listening to their story and sort of articulating it in miniature. So for me, you know, making things, whether it's model trains, model railways, or in this case trees, you know, it's making things is a craft. What makes it more artful is where it's coming from. You know, this isn't just a job for me, it's something I really care about, something I love doing. And I love sharing that with you all. You know what, doing this is making me think about the way my partner sometimes plats the girl's hair, you know, and splitting it and then, you know, or even blow drying it or anything, you know, because I've got this structure here and I've paired it off and I can treat each one separately. It's a bit of order in this weird sort of man-made nature. there is a funny, another one of these reflections of mine of childhood gonna come now. You know, I have got quite strong memories of doing this with my dad. I sometimes wonder whether a lot of this whole hobby for me is trying to find that connection to him. He's no longer with us. He was such a big part of my life. Yeah, we used to sit and make trees together. Not very often. I've got memories of doing it together. Out in the back of what we used to call it the utility room in the home I grew up in. Basically the porch at the back. But we used to use aluminium, was it aluminium? No, stainless steel braided, I guess it would have been aircraft control wire it used to be sort of sold as. You know, like twisted braided wire. And I don't know where he'd read it, obviously somewhere, that's what we used, and my god, it was like, you know, it was insane, because it was basically every time you touched it, it would stab you in the finger, you know. It was incredibly stiff and brittle and really hard to make look anything like a tree, but, you know, some of the trees I still have, actually, I've still got a few of them that Dad made that way, you know, are really artful considering the process that he had to go through to make them. I really enjoy working with copper though, because it's a lot more malleable, but the act of sat here twisting or untwisting, pairing, just, you know, before I even start shaping these into trees and thinking about what form they take, I'm just literally lost in this process of taking a branch and working my way to the end, in this case, or the other way, taking a twig and working my way to the trunk. But both ways, you know, equally sort of easy to get lost in. There's no formula here, you know, I just pulled that apart and decided how much I was going to pair off. As I left that with my fingers, it naturally kinked and two came off, so I've done that, you know, I'm just letting the process kind of find itself. And that's such a lovely way to work, you know, seeing the way the material wants to behave. It is a very natural way to work. And what will result is there'll be a basic structure then, of branches, twigs, and hopefully if I've got the proportions roughly right, which is probably more practice, but I don't, to be honest, if you're working with the lengths we're talking here and you kind of, I think you end up naturally with the sort of right sort of basic proportions anyway. It's more about having the confidence to get enough of a bunch together, because what you don't want is to have a thin tree, you know, you need to have enough sections of wire, filament, twigs, you know, you need enough to sort of pass muster as a realistic sort of size. And of course these are, I mean, at end gauge, these are still small trees. You know, I'm hoping that I can use one of these on this 00 gauge commission. It's going to be small, you know, because we minimise these things in our heads. You know, we put a tray next to them and, you know, the train's like half the size of the tree. You go and look at a real photo, you know, and the trees tower over our railways. So, you know, a lesson to us all really. I mean, it's okay to caricature it. If you're going to, then you need to make sure it's got that feel of realism. You know, don't scale down the thickness of the branches. Sort of everything needs to be in proportion still. There needs to be enough density, I think. These days, I believe you can buy these armatures pre-twisted by someone online. Someone sells these, basically, bare armatures. Why would I pay someone to do this, you know? I mean, yeah, it's time, but it's time invested in myself. it's that moment to be away from, you know, there's no computer, there's no phone, there's no messages going beep, 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 beep. There's no radio, we've just got nature. I mean, I know I'm lucky to be sat here outside, but, you know, you could do this in your lounge with your partner, with your children, or, you know, in part of the house, listen to what's going on, enjoy conversation, sort of reconnect after a day at work. It's a way to unwind, isn't it? It's I've just punned, you know. It's a way to unwind. As I'm sat here twisting pieces of copper wire together, winding them up, I've just said that this is a way to unwind. Classic. But it is. Joking apart, it is a way to unwind. I'm feeling like I've got a tiny bit more of this one to go, and then I'm just going to see what shape it feels like. You know, how's it looking? What sort of form is it going to take? And take these sort of twisted raw trees and make them into something, make them mean something. You know, this whole process is incredibly time consuming, and that's the beauty of it. But, you know, also as I build this up, you know, this has got me in, hasn't it? You know, this has got my touch. This is part of me. So it's going to have my story in. It's got my fingerprints on, literally. Wednesday's market day. The lambs are getting bigger, so presumably that was a farmer moving around with that in mind. So, you know, I haven't got enough. Well, actually, I have got another piece of copper, so I could do it to show you what I would do next. But, you know, what I'm probably thinking is that these two are going to come together and be bound together with some more. So what I'll do here is, rather than twist because I've run out of material, I'll take some strands and wrap it round and round and round and build that up to get some strength in there, and that'll give me, you know, a sort of sizable tree and trunk. So I'm getting the feel for this, but a few of these branches just feel far too long. So what we're going to do is going to take the snips, snip them off, because these little pieces can be used for other bits later. I've got a whole box of them. You tend to use the longer ones first, so you don't want them all to be the same length, but you certainly don't want, you know, single strands that are 2 or 3 inches long, because they're much more prone to being damaged later in the layout, but also they make it all feel a bit too leggy somehow. So there we go, that's better. And then let's have a look at this picture, because I've not got a real elm around here to look at. So I'm just looking at the shape of the twigs at the end, because, you know, I'll put these down. This one earlier that I was working with, that I said was going to become my oak again. You know, I know how to do that. I basically push my nail against my finger, against the copper, and get some twists and 90-degree bends, and gnarl into the twigs at the end. Because if you go and study the way oak trees look, there's nothing straight about them at all. Everything's bent, going in different directions, as if it suddenly decided to change direction. And I love that nature of them. So it's all about putting a lot of twist and bend into them, forcing them to take that shape, but bringing it to life in the process. So and with an oak I tend to like to work with much shorter twigs as well. And of course, you know, you bend it, doesn't look quite right, doesn't feel right, bend it again. It's like an endless process. So there, you know, I'm starting to get a feel for this oak here already, just from that. So I'm going to bend this and that there, this one there. I want to shorten some of these, just a bit long, feel too big. Not being able to get the sort of feel I wanted, like that. Things are too curvy, not sort of twisted enough somehow, because you don't want it to look, as I say, leggy. But with oak especially, the twigs are quite dense at the end, so you know, if I cover this in polyfibre, I don't need lots of thin twig at the end. I'll use the polyfibre to give myself the twig, you know, the very fine branch structure at the ends. Oh yeah, I like that. Okay. It's quite busy on the road. Only a tiny little lane between the village and the next village down the valley. We're on the back side of the River Dee here, so the A5 runs down the other side of the valley, on the other side of the river. And just where we are disappears actually behind a sort of big mound in the middle of the valley. And we've got the railway and the river on our side, and then a very minor road that heads off down towards Berwyn, if you follow it right round. But yeah, a lot of our traffic is just farmers, but yeah, it's been busy as I've been sat here with you today. So that's looking pretty good. I don't know what you can see there, but I'm looking at that and thinking, yeah, that's starting to feel exactly where I know where this tree's going to go. This tree's going to end up on my Festini Oak 009 diorama. I reckon there's probably 2 or 3 trees still needed for that, and that's the thing that's been holding me up actually. I've not had enough trees, so today's been an opportunity to sit down and think about that. But actually, you know what, I'm going to finish this one off. I probably need to add, in fact I probably need to double it in terms of its volume, but when it's finished that's going to be sort of pride, well, not pride of place. There's some amazing trees on it already, but it's going to go towards the front of the scene, you know, to be double that volume, full of greenery. This piece and this piece, I reckon, will, as I say, will form together, and then get some kind of trunk. And what I might do though is actually put them sort of underneath one another to get more of the feel of the elm that I've got in this picture here, which has kind of got domed canopies down a tree. So we'll see, but this is going to require a bit more work. So I'm going to call it a wrap there. Thank you for joining me here. I hope this has been relaxing to some degree. I've enjoyed it at the very least, and appreciate you tuning in to see at least what it's all about. If you've got any questions specifically about tree making and things, by all means do leave them. I'll try and get back to you. But if you've got any sort of reflections on what it means to you and sort of the mindful practice of the hobby and how we can bring ourselves more into the moment, then I'd love to hear that as well. It's something I'm really keen to explore at the moment and to talk about more widely. I think there's a lot of our hobby is about consumerism, about detail. We're all kind of like obsessed with ultra modern ready-to-run models of all sorts of prototypes, having every single detail variation possible through the tooling. It's kind of losing something for me. That isn't really what the hobby I do. I get excited by all that, of course I do, but the hobby I do is more heartfelt, more, I don't know, trees. But I could get as excited about trees as I would about building a small building or a hut or a brick bridge. Or for me, it's about telling that story and about bringing those elements together. But actually, what I've recognised recently is that even through that process, through that flow, from in here to here, through these fingers to these pieces, that flow, that's almost like the definition for me of becoming in the moment. And so I feel like if I can talk about that a bit more with you all, then it might help people. So it's coming from a good place, even if you haven't enjoyed this video. And I'm hoping as things move on with this and a few other things, I'll be able to get back to some of the more usual layout tours and things, which I know have always proven popular here on the channel. So if you're new and you liked this sort of video, there's more like it. If you're just intrigued by what else I've been up to, there's all sorts of workshop tips and looks at layouts I've built for myself and for others. So go mad and enjoy. And until next time, I'll see you all again soon.